And hello to everyone out there. My name is Josh, and I'd like to welcome you to my gaming corner. For today, we're going to be showcasing a prototype game. It's not on the market and has not made its way to Kickstarter yet. I was able to get my hands on the print and play, which is you just basically using it for testing purposes and to see how the game runs. The game is called Dungeons of Infinity by Jack Spoiner. Hopefully, I'm saying that right. If I'm not, please correct me. I tried to get that as right as I possibly could. I just wanted to go ahead and state before we get into actually doing all the setup and everything like that is that this is, like I said, this is the print and play, and the quality of components that you see here is just a general representation of what the game will ultimately have once it actually gets to Kickstarter. How things are going to look may even be different than what you see here. This is just what was available in the print and play, and quality is about as good as my printer was going to do, and about how my ink was. So what I'm trying to say is don't let that be a determination of how the final project is going to be. This is, like I said, just a prototype, so we can see how the mechanics of the game are going to run. And most of that, some of that may even change towards the end, but this is just what I have now and what I'd like to go ahead and show you guys. So what I'm going to be doing here is I'm going to be going over the components of the game, piece by piece. I won't cover every component of the game, but I will try to cover most of it, and basically also use it as a setup for how you're going to go in and setting up for playing any one of the scenarios, or most of the scenarios, I should say. So the first thing we're going to get started with is I have all the components out here on the table, but what we're going to first focus on are our character cards here, and actually laying those out and talking about those structures. Alright, so pretty much the first thing you're going to do in this game, and pretty much a lot of other ones, is go ahead and choose your characters. I want to focus on these two characters right here, and we'll talk about that. Basically, we have a warrior here, which is going to be all melee, and we have a archer or ranger type character, which actually will deal with some range in that. But we'll go over real quick what these cards are and what some of these things mean on the card. At the very top, you're going to have your name, what type you are, like a warrior or an archer here. In the side here where it says fire or poison or just poison here, these are the weaknesses of this particular character. And if you have an enemy that's attacking you, that is attacking you with an elemental power, say fire or ice, or may poison, then even if their hit does not damage you whatsoever, you will still get damage automatically from the elemental attack, or if it's a poison. I believe that the damage that you receive on that is 2 damage to the character. So this lists your weaknesses here. Your next line here is your hit chance, and it's different for each character. In this game, they use D20s for the rolls, and unlike other games that use D20s, this one actually goes for the lower rolls. Okay, so if it's stated here that hit chance is 13, you're going to want to roll between a 1 and a 13 to make that. Other things will modify that, specifically by items that you're carrying or some of your ability cards, which we'll go to in just a minute. But yes, your hit chance is what you want to roll that number or lower to be able to hit the enemy that you're targeting. Noise 5 is how much noise your actual character makes moving around the dungeon, and this comes into play when we're actually drawing the boss cards later in the game when we do certain things in the dungeon. And this is going to say, some of the boss cards say go towards the higher noise. Well, the warrior has a noise of 5, the archer has a noise of 2, so the one with higher noise would be the warrior. So it's kind of you make more noise, you're just bigger and bulkier and carrying more stuff. So the next one is your power. This one is the number that's going to determine how much damage you actually do if your hit was able to succeed on an enemy. And that is subtracted by their defense. So for instance, let's say an enemy had, let's say you were successful on the hit, you rolled 1 or a 13, then you would take your power and you would minus their defense. So if they had a defense of 3, you have a power of 5, well, then you've just done 2 damage to them. And if you were attacking with anything that did elemental weaknesses, if they had some weakness against elementals just like you do, then you would do additional damage based on that. Your next number is your defense. So if you're getting attacked by somebody, that is what you're going to subtract their power by. Same thing. And then this last one here, AP3, these are your action points that you're going to get. This is a dungeon crawl game. And so you use these action points inside the dungeon when you're moving around from room to room. Use them from anything from moving, running, opening a treasure chest, to examining a pile of debris, to looking at a body, interacting with the merchant. Most of your things that you're going to use your action points for cost about 1 action point. Others are higher, and I think even one might be a half, I think, when you run. So those are the points that you're going to have to spend to actually get your character to do things while you're in there. And we'll go over those a little bit. We'll give some examples of those a little later. The next thing we have here is our experience bar. Every time that your character is successful on the hit, not if you were able to do any damage, but if you were able to make a hit, you gain 1 experience point. Your character starts at 0. And every hit that you successfully make brings you up to the next one, and so on and so forth. When you get to these here, that have, this one has a 2, this one has a 3, a 4, and a 5. These indicate that your character has just leveled up. So if I made it all the way here to 10, my character, who was a level 1 to start out with, is now a level 2. And this gets reset back to 0 once you become a new level. And if your health is a starting 13 for the warrior specifically on a level 1. If I was to go to level 2, then my health would go to 14. And then level 3 would be 15. Level 4 would be 14. Or I'm sorry, not 14. Level 4 would be 16. Got to go with the color codes here. And then my level 5 would give me a total of 17. Another thing to note about when your character actually levels up is, let's say I had been beaten down pretty far, maybe to 2 or so, and I had just gotten to level 2. My XP would reset, I would go to level 2, and my health would go all the way back up to where it should be at the new level. The next thing we have is the boss events. Okay, these come into play later as we're moving through the dungeon, and whenever we take actions in the dungeon, for this particular character, whenever we do combat, move or run, we're going to draw boss event cards. And I'll go into those boss event cards later, but just note right now that for this character specifically, whenever we perform one of these actions, we'll draw a boss event card. Now, performing multiples of the same action will not draw more boss event cards. It has to be 1 card for each separate event that you do. So, for instance, if this character, for his 3 action points, chose to do a combat, a move, and a run, then he would draw 3 boss event cards. If he used his 3 action points to do all moving, he would only draw 1 event card for those movements. So, down here, if we look at our ranger, she only draws it on melee combat. Okay, so this one, the more things he does, he's drawing more attention from the boss inside the dungeon. Like I said, we'll get to those later. And she's a little more stealthy, so she's not drawing as much attention when she does her actions like moving around and running, but when she does combat, she is drawing some attention. All right, for your attacks and combat in the dungeon, if you do not see a number here underneath your hit chance, then that means you're pretty much only able to attack enemies in the same room that you're in. If you do see a number down here, like this one, R2, this one means whatever this number is, this is how many rooms beyond the one that you're in you can attack. So as far as a ranger, if they're standing in one room, they can attack up to 2 rooms further from where they're at. Okay? What also is included with... oh, I'm sorry, not yet. These right here, down here, that say left hand, body, feet, and right hand, these are going to be our inventory slots for items that we're going to pick up later in the game. Right now, how the character sheets are is they'll read like axe, knife, or sword can be put in your left hand. You can put armor in your body slot. Feet can take sandals, and the right hand can take axe, knife, or sword. It's like this left hand can hold a shield, but not the right hand. So this is going to list what you can get, and we'll go into the reward cards a little later. Also, we have little tokens here. These would be the little tokens I use as we're moving through the dungeon, just to keep track of my characters. I may try to find some little standee for them, but that's pretty much all I was able to print. Next, with each of your characters, you have a ability deck. All right, and please forgive my, like I said, I wasn't able to print backs for all of my cards. Unfortunately, some of them do, but some of them don't, so I can only pretty the top one. So I'll leave that one there. But as far as your starting ability cards, every character has 8 cards to start with. And most of the cards you are able to use at level 1 with your character. And you'll know that by, you won't see anything here right under the name of the skill or the ability. If you find one that actually is a level higher than you're not able to use, like Power Dash ability, you have a level 2 ability. You cannot use this one until your character is a level 2. You also know that by your level chart down here about the effect of it. It's blank for level 1 right here. It means this, you cannot use it during this time or at this level. We also have Whirling Jump, which is a level 3 ability, and you can see the first 2 levels don't have a number here, so we're not able to use that yet. And we'll go into more detail. We'll give some examples about what some of these things mean here in just a minute. But I just wanted to go over that each character does have those. Oh, and the cost. There is a cost for using the abilities. Some of them don't have a cost of anything, 0, but some of them do. 1s. This one has a 2. Power Rage is a 3. So just in order for me to use this card, I'd have to use all the action points that my warrior character has. So the ability cards for setup, you'll lay those out and you'll get those ready to go, and you'll set the ones that for a higher level off to the side until your character's actually able to level up. The next thing we're going to talk about is, once we've chosen our characters, okay, where do the characters go? Well, the characters want to get into the dungeon here, and they want to start their looting and searching and seeing what they can go find. You're going to draw your first tile here. This is your starter tile. This is the one we're always going to start with. And you can recognize it by one, it says starter on the back side. And the other one is you have a merchant icon right there on the tile. Okay, well, these are our 2 characters, for instance. I have my warrior and my archer here. This is where they're going to be starting out. The next thing they have to do is start their questing by purchasing items from the merchant. Now, this is a special opportunity when you start the game, is you can buy from the merchant without spending any of your action points from the get-go. And this is only at the beginning of the start of your scenario that you're going to be playing. Now, every character starts with 3 coins. They're called Farnsworth coins. So we're going to give them their 3 coins each that they're going to be able to play with. And again, please forgive my cutting abilities and my printing abilities, but it's the best that I had to work with. Alright, so each one of them is going to start with 3 coins in the game. And then we're going to have to go to the store and see what we can buy. So the next thing we're going to talk about is our store cards. Alright, so we have our store, and we need to go ahead and get that set up as we're starting the game. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to lay out store cards here. We're going to have 6 cards from our store, and we're going to have 4 cards from our weapons and armor store. So we're going to have 10 cards total. So we're going to go ahead and lay those out. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Make it nice and straight. Alright, for our weapons and armor, we're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? So we now have our starting items for the game, and we need to find out, okay, who's going to be able to purchase first from the store with the 3 coins that they have? Well, we actually need to determine who our first player is going to be. Now, in order to do that, we have just to roll some d20s, a simple system for that, and whoever rolls the lowest is going to get to activate first. So the first person I'm going to roll for is my warrior that's standing in the dungeon waiting to go. Okay, my warrior got a 9. Next person that's going to roll is my archer. Okay, my archer got a 13. So our warrior is going to be acting first, and then our archer is going to go next. Okay, so the first thing the warrior is going to do, he's got 3 coins that he wants to spend. And he's going to look at these numbers here, these ones in the circle yellow. Let me make sure you guys can see that. Okay, he's going to look at those and see which ones he can actually afford. Now, these things that say 8 up here or 4, he's not going to be able to purchase those. He can purchase the super health potion for 2, which gives him plus 10 health. Discard after use. He can purchase the scroll of invisibility for 1. It gives him an extra action point. He also could use that to buy some weapons here. He's got ring mail, which is 1, which gives him a defense of 1. So our archer, not our archer, I'm sorry, our warrior has a defense of 5. If we spend 1 coin here, and we'll put that back in the store there, then our warrior can have this armor, and he has got 2 to spend with, and you go ahead and let's just say he can get the knife next. He's got 1 more coin to spend. Let's go ahead and give him the sand. No, let's give him the scroll of invisibility. Okay, so now he has spent all 3 of his coins, and those are going to go in the inventory slot of my warrior. Next we have is the ranger is going to need to go and buy her equipment. Well, what we need to do is replace everything that has been taken out of here with new cards for our ranger's turn. Okay. Alright, so now that we have that, we have all of our cards refreshed, and the ranger can go ahead and spend her coins on what she wants. A special thing you can do when you're purchasing. Alright, you can, if you don't see an item there in the store that you want, you can actually ask the merchant to go back and get it. You can have him fetch an item for you. So for instance, you can ask him, do you have a treasure chest key that I can purchase? And he's like, yes, I do, but you're going to have to wait a little while because I have to go run and get that. So what the merchant's going to do is he's going to find the key, for instance. He's going to put it aside, and he is going to say, okay, I can get that for you, but it's not going to be until a few turns until I'm able to get back with that. So what you're going to do is you're going to use one of your timers here, and at the end of the archer's turn, or round for the archer, we're going to rotate this from the 3 where it started at to the 2, and then again to the 1 until it's finally able to be purchased at the 1, which means your character can then go back and that key is available for purchase at the price listed on the card. So that's if you know you need something and you want them to go run back and get it from the merchant. So now that that is actually completed, we've purchased all of our items, or I'm going to still need to go back and purchase the 3, thinking I'm already done with that. But we just use that as an example. Our purchasing, let's assume that we've purchased everything for our warrior and archer, and they're actually ready to go ahead and get set out and move through the dungeon. Now we're going to go ahead and move and talk about the dungeon tiles. Okay, so we've gotten to the point where we've got our characters chosen, we've got our ability cards set, we've got our store items purchased. We're actually ready to get in the dungeon and start working our way on whatever scenario or quest that we're doing. Okay, so what we have here is we have our characters on our starting tile that are ready to go, and I'll flip this around this way just so you guys can see that. Now, on this tile we have, from the starter tile, we have 3 directions that we can go in. We can go in north, we can go in east, west, but we cannot go south. There is no door symbol here at the bottom. It's only here at the top and on the side. So this is where we're actually going to have to be starting our adventuring from. So here are the tiles that we're going to be drawing from in Dungeons of Infinity. Depending upon the scenario, you might have all one pile like this. You might have several different piles of dungeon tiles. It's up to the scenario how that is actually going to be laid out. Now, for this example, we're just drawing from one pile of tiles. So what's going to happen is the warrior is going to make his choice, use one of his action points to move north to a newer room. Okay, so when we do that, we're going to draw one, and then we're going to notice a couple of things about this tile. First is we're going to notice a number, okay? And then we're going to notice this little blue arrow down here. This little blue arrow needs to be aligned with the tile that you're coming from and the direction that you're coming from. So since we're going north, we're going to align the blue arrow to this one here. And any subsequent rooms that we also move into, again, will also follow the same rules. Now, for this tile here, there's only one direction we can go in, and that's the east. So the blue arrow would align here with the direction that we're coming from. Okay. Now, the other thing that you notice from this on the tiles were numbers. Okay, what do those numbers mean? Well, those numbers relate to the room content charts, and I'll show you that right here. All right, room content charts are going to tell us what is in these dungeons, what are in the actual tiles every time we get to that, or every time we discover a new one. Okay, so for instance, if we're playing a normal difficulty game, which pretty much I'm going to be, then we have several cards to choose from, and you probably draw these at random, and some of them will have things show up in different orders. If you draw a tile for this one, for instance, that is a 1 through 5, then you have a pile of debris. 6 through 9, you have a body. Floor covered in mist is 10 through 15, and treasure chest is 16 through 20. Some of the other normal difficulty cards will be a little bit different layout than that one right there. So for instance, we have a 16. Now, that means for the one that we chose, or let's just pull one at random here, it doesn't matter, is 16 through 20 for a normal difficulty room is a floor covered in mist. All right, so now this actually brings us into the heart and soul of this game, the big bad pile over here. So it's the one I haven't touched on yet. Okay, these are the perils that you're going to find yourself facing inside the dungeon. All right, we have what's called our risk decks, which all need to be sorted out individually. We have the treasure chests deck. We have the piles of debris deck. We have the body or remains deck. And then we have the mist or the floor mists deck. Under each of those, we have our tokens that represent those things. Below that, we have our dungeon boss, or let me start over here. We have our normal enemies deck. Okay, this is a thick deck of enemies that we're going to find as we're going through the dungeon, and these are going to be many that we come across and the weaker of what we fight. The next step are the bosses. Okay, these are going to be more of the, what you think of as the elite enemies that you're going to fight, and much harder than the deck of enemies, the common things you'll come across. And then in the very final thing is the dungeon boss. Okay, these are the big bad things that are roaming around in there that you're not wanting to stir up or disturb. These are set by the scenario that you're playing. Generally, you'll only find one of them, and that'll be pre-selected for the scenario. Some of them may have a random draw or just tell you which boss you are going to be facing. Okay, that is where the boss event cards come in, and we'll talk a little bit about those in just a second. I wanted to kind of run through and I wanted to show you what all of these were. Okay, so let's go back to the dungeon here. And remember, our warrior said, I want to go north. So he has put himself into this room here. This is what he explored. Well, for that is a floor covered in mist. Okay, so we have our little mist token here. Just to say this floor is covered in mist. And we're going to go ahead and immediately draw a mist card or a risk card for that particular thing. So when we do that, we'll just read this one off here. So you enter the mist and it flows all around you. You hear a loud noise behind you. You turn to see enemies forming behind you. So this one, we're going to draw number H enemies. What this means, the number H, is telling you how many heroes are in the dungeon. Not players, but heroes. Okay, so for this we have 2 heroes in this dungeon. It's not talking about the room we're in, it's talking about the entire dungeon itself. So we're going to draw 2 enemies. So we're going to set that card aside. And oh, I also read this one too. It says draw rewards based on enemy rows. Okay, so when it says draw 2 enemies, we're going to have to make some room. And this is how I wouldn't have my table laid out when it's finally all said and done. I'm just kind of doing this so I can show you the most components that I can with the limited amount of space I have. Alright, so we're going to draw 2 enemies. And I'm going to draw this as our common enemy deck here. Now we fight enemies, not... We're kind of simulating the combat that's happening in the room there. So we're going to have 2 enemies right out in front of us. Okay? And these enemies that we've drawn are engaged with me. Now, we have a single row of enemies, and a row consists of up to 3 enemies per row. If you have 4 enemies, then you'll start a second row, which will be row 2. If you have more than that, or more than 3 for the second row, then you'll start a third row up at the top. Okay, but we only have 2 rows, or, I'm sorry, 2 enemies, so we only have 1 row. For every row of enemies, as it says, draw rewards based on enemy rows. Okay, that brings us to our reward deck. Okay, this is our rewards. These are the things that we're going to find in the dungeon through treasure chests, bodies we search, or enemies that we fight. For every card, and I don't have the backings on these, I apologize. Okay, we don't reveal the reward card we're going to get, but we set it there to the side of each row. So if I had had 4 enemies, for instance, I had to put a third enemy here, which would complete my row 1, and then I go to row 2 to place that 4th enemy up there. I would then draw another reward card to put in this row. But for right now, we only have 2 enemies that we're going to be fighting, and the reward card goes beside it. So that is what happens when we come across a mist. It's immediately resolved, and the only action point that we spent was to move from this room into this one. So we still have, after that one, I think that was only 1 action point, we still have 2 action points left for us to continue. Now, in a normal game, those action points would be immediately used to start attacking the 2 creatures that are in front of you. And the other thing we also need to look at is, remember we talked about boss events earlier? Well, these are the things that I'm talking about. When we perform those actions, we need to draw boss event cards. So 2 things that we are going to be coming across is we did a move action, which is going to draw a boss event card. And we're most likely going to be doing combat. Okay, and we'll draw that after we do the actual action. So when we draw a boss event card, for instance here, when actions tell us to, when we perform certain things that say draw a boss event card, these are what we're going to be bringing up. Okay, so we have a boss event card, and it's going to be separated into 2 different items. The first here is going to see, does the boss, who has not spawned yet, does he spawn in? And if you draw a 0, it means he does not spawn in. Okay, you're safe. For instance, if we had to draw something, let me get an example here. It's going to take me a while because there are a lot more boss event cards with a 0 than there are with an actual number. Okay, so let's say we drew this boss number 17 card. If we had tile number 17 on the actual board here, then the boss would then have spawned into that room we were in. Okay, and then from further on after that, after the boss has spawned in, we're no longer going to be worried about the top part of these boss event cards when we draw them, because we still will draw them. What we're going to be worried about is this bottom part. These are our instructions for the boss monster, or for the dungeon boss, not the bosses. I know it's a little confusing. They're not instructions for these guys. It's only instructions for the dungeon boss itself. Like I said, consider these more of elite enemies, and this is the ultimate boss. But yes, these are only for the dungeon boss instructions on how to actually perform their turn or what they're going to be doing. For instance here, this says move 1, so it's going to be moving 1 tile towards the highest noise. Remember, we talked about noise earlier. Okay, so if we had a warrior that had gone south and the archer who had gone north or east or west or whatever, and they were separated, then the dungeon boss is going to be going towards our warrior because he has the highest noise. All right, so every time we're going to be drawing those cards, every time we have to draw one of those cards, we're going to resolve it if the dungeon boss is in it. If not, we keep drawing zeros, and that means we're safe for now, and there is no dungeon boss that's coming up. I think there were like 60 out of the 70 cards that are in that deck, 60 of them were 0, and the other ones were the odd-numbered dungeon tiles. Okay? So those are how the boss event cards are actually going to work. Now, back into the dungeon. So we still have our hero who's in the room with the floor-covered mist and the enemies. Real quick, though, I do want to go over some of the other ones before we actually touch on combat. So we'll kind of go over that real quick. I'll move those aside. Hopefully I'm not being too awful confusing about this. But let's say it was the warrior's turn was finished out, didn't have anything left, and we wanted to go ahead and start with the archer, and she chose to go unheroically to the west and not help our hero friend in the north. Well, she's going to say, okay, I'm going to spend one action point to go ahead and move into this room here. So we're going to draw our next tile, line up the blue arrow, and she now finds herself in this room. Now we consult our chart here. For a room 1 to 6 is a treasure chest. Okay, so we've now found a treasure chest in this room. Well, if we did not buy a key for this treasure chest, we have no options to open it unless we have some kind of a skill or ability that allows us to open that chest up. Now, looking through the archer's abilities, can't use that one. Aim, poison arrow, defensive illusion, shield of arrows, lightning speed, rain of arrows. Okay, unfortunately, she doesn't have anything in her abilities that's going to allow her to open up that chest without a key. I believe if we look through here, through our warrior stuff, we have something called bash chest for 1 action point. Now, he can, without a key, bash a chest open, but if we go ahead and do that, if we get him in the same room, he's going to draw the number of boss event cards based on level. So he's a level 1 here. He's going to be drawing 2 of those boss event cards. So he's drawing a whole heck of a lot of attention to himself just to do that. Okay? But let's say, for instance, that she did have a key and she used another action point to go ahead and open up that treasure chest. Well, we'd go back to our risk cards over here, and we draw our card to see, okay, what happens? Well, we get some gold. All right, so we have gold here. This is real nice for our hero to carry. And if we bring this back to the merchant, it is worth 4 coins. One thing to note about gold is your character has a limit of what they can carry, and this is directly based on their power level. Their power, what they can carry, the amount of stuff they can carry is their power level plus 1. So the warrior can carry 5 plus 1, which is 6. Our archer can only carry 4 items. Okay, so if I had 4 of these gold, I would be encumbered. Okay, and then I would have to do something about that. So when you get enough of these and you find yourself encumbered, you need to run back to the merchant and trade it in for gold. So that's our treasure chests. Another thing that we could look at is we have the same thing if we had drawn like a debris pile or a body, let's say that, then the same things would occur. We'd go in there and we'd say, okay, we're going to want to investigate that loot pile or that debris pile. And we draw a risk card based on that. If we wanted to search the body, then we draw the risk card based on that one. Now, when you're moving into a room with mist, there is no action point required to search the mist. It is an automatic happening. So when my character moved into here for 1 action point, into the mist, the card was automatically resolved. Okay? Now, when my archer went into here and saw, hey, there's a treasure chest, or there's a body, or a pile of debris, they have the option to just move on from there and not do anything about it and go to the next room. The mist, like I said, is the only thing that is an automatic uncovering of the item. Okay, and some other things that can happen in the dungeon per the event cards or the risk cards is sometimes a chamber will get flooded, or there will be a chasm that opens up which prevents you from crossing that one unless you had a rope, or your chamber might get flooded in with lava. I don't know how to say that, but there's some of the markers I wanted to show that. And that, guys, is pretty much the components. Sorry about the mess here. That is, think about the most general overview I can give of the game. I'm going to go ahead, and I think my next video is going to be the coin quest, one of the scenarios in the book. It's one of the really simple starting quests to do. It actually does not involve any of the boss events or the dungeon bosses in the game, so that takes that element completely out of play, but everything else is in. I think you even take some of the catastrophic events out of the decks. If I take the risk deck here of the debris and I kind of flip through that without reading any of them, some of them have a C on them. I'm trying to find one that actually says that. Okay, we have a C here. This is a catastrophic event. These are actually taken out because there's some really bad stuff that happens to you and your heroes. Okay, so the coin quest is probably going to not have that stuff in there. So when we come back, I'll have everything set up as I'm going to play that scenario. We'll have our heroes picked out, and we'll have those set up, and we'll actually run through the whole entire scenario and see how it's actually going to play out. So I hope you stick around. I hope you enjoyed this unboxing of sorts, components, setup video. I'm really excited to get this to the table. Finding some really interesting mechanics in here that I want to kind of flesh out and see how they're actually going to work at the table. So hopefully you stick around and we'll play this through together.